Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I am Kenneth Amaduri, and I'm joined today with a very special guest, Dan Kurz, returning guest of DK Analytics. I love talking with Dan so much. He's such a nice guy, well-researched, well-versed on the economy and what's going on with societal trends and how it impacts our money going forward. And I think that's what's really important here, because what society is doing is going to impact the flow of capital for the good or the bad, the good, the ugly. I mean, look, we're going to be talking about things today: censorship, this trend towards socialism, government control, fascists. I mean, this is happening. I mean, all the craziness that might seem tinfoil hats. I mean, this is front and center Fox, CNN News. And we're going to talk about this today. So, Dan, thanks for coming on the show with me.
Thanks a lot for having me, Kenneth. It's a pleasure to talk to you once again.
How are you doing? How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well. The state here, we luckily have a governor that is more into the South Dakota model, not quite to the same degree as that fantastic governor. But I think he gets it, and there's a hope that sanity might return before the bewitching hour.
Yeah, I'm very disheartened to see, so many YouTube channels getting shut down all at once. X22, SGT Report, World Alternative Media. So many of these, then the list goes on. I can put the SHTF plan article in the description area for people to read it. And it's an ongoing list, by the way. And quite frankly, we're taking a chance here with my channel being shut down, but it's just free speech. The tech giants are on a rampage, especially now. There was a tech person on Jake Tapper's CNN show talking and suggesting, someone who worked for Twitter and Google, suggesting that they mute Trump up until the election, completely silence him for the fear of misinformation. And so it's a crazy world that we're living in. And the subscription to this, I don't think would have been believable not a few years ago. But here we are in 2020, Dan.
It's truly Orwellian, and I agree with you. I think we obviously have a constitutional framework which isn't just to be pushed aside, and the codification of inalienable rights, obviously the Bill of Rights, all these things are there for purpose. It's to maximize individual freedom, liberty, right to assemble, right to speak your mind, as long as you don't do anyone else harm. And if we stifle this, we stifle free speech, we stifle property rights. You know about that too, in your own business. Then pretty soon we're heading towards full-blown tyranny. And I think the whole coronavirus response also sadly belongs more in that category than not. So yeah, it's we're trying to resist the back in the USSR kind of development. It's very scary when files are discovered and then shared by the New York Post about Hunter Biden and all his less than savory business dealings and other antics, and that the big social media giants hiding under Section 230, which is supposed to protect open platforms, not one-sided ones, decide to take this and pull the plug on it. That's not how you can have an informed citizenry, and that's not how you have freedom. And at the end of the day, that's not how you're going to have property rights and a robust, free place in which to live. So, yeah, I think it's pretty serious stuff.
Now, many would say, as libertarians, free market people, that YouTube, Twitter, these are private companies and they can do what they want. And as individuals, we can go wherever we want to get our news. And a lot of people are, by the way. I mean, so many people are moving towards BitChute, and those platforms are exploding. And it's the reason I think we're seeing gold get attention, Bitcoin as competition to money. All of these things are getting attention because of the craziness that's going on. But
True.
what would you say to that? Is that okay for these big tech companies to pick and choose who they want to silence?
Well, not if they get to hide behind Section 230
And
of,
explain what that is.
well, Section 230 was put on the books back when you had CompuStat and the internet just got started. People wanted to have messaging boards, and the people that got together and put these websites into business where people could share thoughts, kind of like a blog, multidimensional blog, they were to be shielded from lawsuits, from libel kinds of lawsuits, because they were just there as a venue to represent the free thinking, the thoughts of all the participants. They didn't hold out to be journalists, and they weren't responsible for any content. They were, in essence, just a place where people could share thoughts, other than, incite crime or do terrorism or illicit drugs. Everything else was fair game, and that they have shielded themselves from that and have misused it to, in essence, take down anything that harks to a more traditional, constitutional, conservative, or even libertarian take. They are obviously in the camp of one world government, having no difference in opinion. And I mean, just look at, they air everything unsubstantiated about the Trump administration. Yet when you have a Hunter Biden incident, they take it all down. What the heck is that? I mean, these aren't sources that are made up. I mean, you had the FBI, you had other agencies come in and say, obviously this isn't Russian interference, for God's sake. It's a shop that had Hunter Biden's laptop and he was too drugged out or whatever to pay any attention to it. I mean, when these things are taken down, this is the press. The social media giants are an elongation or an internet-based continuation of the press, meaning to shield the leftist side of government, which is the dominant part of government, from any kind of closer examination in terms of what's not right and how they're acting lawlessly. So this is very dangerous for a republic where the individual is supposed to be the sovereign and not a government, in my opinion.
Dan, I couldn't agree more. And I guess my question to you is, what are the implications of this? Or what is your suspicion? Because it's hard to, all we have are a certain amount of data, call it, cards in our hand and make a decision. If we're playing poker, maybe we got a full house of information, or maybe we have a three of a kind of information. But given the facts, with what we know the tech giants are doing to, paint a rosy picture for Biden and to help him win this election, I mean, what makes you think that there's not going to be a blatant outright cheating to ensure a Biden victory? And it really doesn't take much. It's not like you got to cheat in California. You don't have to cheat in New York. I mean, it only takes a couple swing states to sway
Right.
the vote, and it's, I mean,
Right.
and you don't have to do it. You don't have to do a lot. It's just a very little to change the course of the election.
All good points. Obviously, I'm just making an educated guess, but I would say that alt media, your channel, Sean's channel, X22 Report, Liberty giants like Mark Levin and others, are Rush Limbaugh and what have you. All this side of more traditionalist, constitutionalist, libertarian, and conservative news has been muffled for a long time, because obviously the media is in bed with the bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy is left because they grow their fiefdoms. What am I trying to say? I think it's important to get the news out. To what degree people make use of the internet or alternative media to inform themselves beyond the propaganda that most of the Pravda press or mainstream media puts out, I obviously don't know, Kenneth. We all don't, but we're going to find out. But I think people have a gut feel about what's going on. Uh, I mean, look at the Russian collusion hoax, the Ukrainian hoax, all these things they try to pin on Trump, which they themselves actually did. It's a great way of deflecting attention from what you did and painting the other guy with exactly, what you're guilty of. Now, if people, I think, get that at the gut level, they get what happens when you realize that the amount of people that have succumbed to this pandemic, however horrible it is, isn't as big as the damage the response has collectively done to our way of life, to our ability to breathe freely without masks, to our liberties, to our businesses, which have been ruined, to a suicide rate which is going up. I think broadly stated, you're going to vote for someone that is more on the side of freedom than tyranny. And I think the obvious candidate, with all his flaws, including way too much government spending, the choice is clearly Donald Trump. And the Republicans, even the rhinos, aren't as bad as the Marxist Democrats, because ultimately, Kenneth, I think we agree, if you look at what you said and the stifling of alternative views, they want to roll out one-party government like in Sacramento from sea to shining sea. They want to impose it, whether it's unlimited, unbridled third world amnesty, whether it's a green energy design where fossil fuels are killed off and so is the productivity and the leveraged output in our way of life. They want to, in essence, control everything. And they see this chance, and I think the virus is very closely associated with that, because when you scare people into something, then they'll do it in the name of safety. Benjamin Franklin once said, if you give up liberty for safety, you end up with neither, or something very close to those lines. And I think in many ways, despite this endless propaganda of mainstream media from CNN on down, a lot of people know at the gut level that this isn't right. And you're banking on those coming out in enough numbers to vote for more of a constitutional form of government. But they have to be so pervasive to offset all the cheating, the mail-in voting cheating capacity that the Democrats are launching. I don't know if you recall, but for flavor, when Romney ran against Obama in 12, in the entire city of Philadelphia, there wasn't one precinct that had a vote for Romney. I mean, this sounds like total lunacy, but check it out online. This is the kind of development. That's why I think it's important for people that value freedom and property rights to come out in record numbers and vote for the only chance. And whether there's enough of us left, I don't know. I sure hope so, because otherwise, I think we're going to lose the very essence of a constitutional republic.
Yeah, and we already have indications that the Democrats want to stack the courts. They want to add more states, and it's a mismanagement of what is best for the country long term. And again, I know that the Republicans aren't this perfect, altruistic constitutional party. But again, it's like, the better of the two evils. And I know, I mean, we're leaving myself out there for a lot of arrows to be thrown at me. Oh, you support the Republicans? I got it. I know there's a lot of issues and a lot of critique going on, but look, this is kind of what we have. And we got to just continue to call them out as need be. But I mean, between the two, what other choice do we have? So, having said that, Dan, I mean, my goodness, I mean, we're heading towards socialism. This is, between the masks and the lockdowns and the control, the test that has been done on the American people for a virus that, was greatly mismanaged. So many extra people died than they needed to, lies coming from the CDC, this push for vaccines. And, so many doctors, by the way, having almost perfect success records, keeping people out of hospitals with
Right.
therapeutics, medicines,
Right.
Remedies,
Right.
and if this was known on a conventional mainstream basis, maybe we don't have to look like the Twilight Zone. So, I mean, that's the real issue here. Look, I got a mask here. I'm working remotely at the moment. I'm conditioned to deal with this world that we're living in, to get along. And so, I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think you said an important word, conditioned. Let you and I'm going to publish something on this online as a post because my daughter is really getting throttled by having to wear a mask. At least our schools in Florida are open, but you have to wear a mask. We know, and I think the studies are very, very prevalent in this direction, that masks are very poor inhibitors of the virus transmission. In other words, the particles are too small. We also know, and this even comes from the CDC, that 99.999% of people between 1 month of age and 20 years don't or recover wonderfully if they contract this virus, better than an average flu or influenza. I'm not trying to compare the two directly, but to make the point. Well, if we know these things, and we know that history suggests that if the strong members of society are exposed to virus that they can put down, and we've had plenty of viruses since humanity started. I mean, I mentioned to you in the 60s, we mentioned the Woodstock era. You had the B1H1 virus and all these other. We went through those and we did what typically society does that's mature and does a good risk return trade-off. We sheltered those people that have pre-existing conditions, that have serious chronic illnesses from the infections, from the viruses, from the flus. And this is what we didn't do this time. We've trumped up the numbers, no pun intended. And the fact of the matter is, and we discussed this before you hit the record button, that even the CDC says that out of the tragic loss of life, 200,000, 220,000 now in the United States that can be chalked up to being impacted by the coronavirus, it isn't the sole trigger for 94% of those lives that were in fact lost. Said to you in other words, Kenneth, we're going to lose people that have cancer or have diabetes or have lung disease to various other issues like just a normal flu. It just happens and it's sad. But we don't change the world we live in. We don't lock businesses down. We don't discourage people from being natural or normal. We just isolate those that need to be isolated. If you can, in today's world, convince the vast majority of the population to wear a mask, even though the efficacy of that mask, and I'm going to publish something on this, is not good, then tell me, what are they going to have us do next? That's my point. It's the conditioning. And it no longer is sane. It's not good policy. It's destructive of freedom and business. And as a result, you end up doing what? You crash freedom. You crash property right protections. People go out of business. You have to spend a lot more money, run much bigger deficits, then you have to print the money to pay for that. That is not a wealth of nations trajectory, and it's not a freedom trajectory. But if enough of us don't stand up and resist, what science suggests is not a good public policy in terms of a virus response, then in a way we end up getting what we deserve.
Absolutely. Dan, it is such a crazy world. And I'm just so in shock as to what we're seeing. I mean, the shutdowns, the lockdowns of these YouTubers, my friends, people I know, I've spoken with, I've been interviewed on, I'm just so horrified to see what is going on. But I'm also optimistic that other solutions are now going to surface and come up as a result, because this is so mainstream now. It's not like you need to be a conspiracy theorist to say, hey, we need another platform that competes with YouTube or Twitter or Facebook. I mean, this is becoming very, very aware. I mean, even guys like Joe Rogan, JP Sears, people that aren't necessarily, just they're not your alternative media talking heads. I mean, these are people who might have voted Democrat, or, then now they're questioning. They're saying, hey, this is a problem. And so that's when, things have gone too far. When, the mainstream is saying, hey, what's going on here? But, it's almost like when they do go too far, then it becomes, top down authority, tyranny,
Yes.
by force. And so that's the concern. That is the real concern here. And so, having said that, let's talk about, how this might impact money, the flow of capital. And I'll leave it there. Well, I mean, what are your thoughts when I say, how this might impact the flow of capital? What comes to your mind?
Well, you've mentioned shutdowns and lockdowns numerous times, so let me stay there for 1 minute longer. Uh, Very bright people, including Peter Schiff, has said that the coronavirus policy response is the straw that broke the camel's back. I keep saying it's the bridge that fell on the camel, because the amount of destruction of the global supply chain and small businesses and landlords and gyms and what have you. I mean, half of the economy is small business. And many of these businesses have been nurtured over generations, and they've been wiped out. And it's very difficult for them to come back. So what is the policy response? Well, you shut down, lock down, put face masks on, social distance so you can't fill an airplane, so no airliner can ever make money again. Delta had an 84% reduction in passenger revenues in Q3 after 94% in Q2. There's no way an airline with its high fixed cost and structure and high operating leverage, in other words, can ever make money with those kind of load factors. So what you're doing through this brain dead, tyrannical, business and freedom killing global, actually, virus policy response, with happy exceptions in Sweden and South Dakota, to a degree in Florida, you're killing the goose that lays the golden egg. And you're forcing governments to, in essence, after they shut down business, shut down commerce, shut down joy, cause depressions, cause people not to get operations they need, and all this other collateral damage, which is anything but collateral. It's bigger than the freaking problem. That's the whole point. So what do? Because they have printing presses, because we're not tethered to gold and silver, they print. And unfortunately, K Street and Wall Street, the fascistic enterprise that is the Standard & Poor's 500 universe, they get their fixes first. And Main Street often doesn't, or it's too late. And what is the policy response? They print the money and hand it out. How much terrible waste is associated with all these bailouts? There was a recent uptick in new businesses being incorporated, where people are saying, oh, look, everything's turning. The Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP. Well, did anyone think that they're lining up to build a new business prior to the next round of fiscal stimulus? But just look at what's going on with the size of our deficit. At the national level, we are running a deficit this year that's about $4.5 trillion, right? It took that, if you will, is the increase in debt that we're going to have. It took the country 180 years to run up $2 trillion in debt. We are running bigger, not only fiscal deficits at the federal level, but a lot of these really locked down blue states, up to 40% of their revenues have been lost because they've shut the place down. So we're not in a sustainable trajectory, either federal or state. Businesses, obviously, a lot of them have gone under, especially the small ones. So what is the response? You add to debt by printing the money, but you, in essence, kill the organic growth prospects of the businesses to go forward with. You ask people, what kind of contract law do we have? What happened to property right protections? You have the takings clause protection of the Fifth Amendment. What we've done here, on the name of fighting a virus that is a fraction of what they say it is is we've actually taken property away from tons of people. Millions of businesses have been shut down. So against this backdrop, what do? They print money, they do stimulus, so we get bigger deficits. You know, recently you've seen very robust consumer spending numbers, right? I don't know if you saw for September, up 1.2%, up 5.4% nominal terms for the year. Well, how is that possible if 38 million or 38% of the workforce of 160 million prior to this pandemic response were terminated, or we still have 900,000 people losing their jobs weekly? Or if you take a look at John Williams' shadow stats, U6 equivalent measure, it's 27%, not 12%. So yeah, we can print the money, but we're not creating the value. And a lot of the things we're buying are sucked in from overseas. That's why the deficit, the trade deficit, is expanding like crazy. So what does this all mean? It means we're heading into socialism, into even deeper into cronyism, where K Street, Wall Street get their cut, and the rest of the people are, in essence, bought off by stimulus checks that a government can't afford, that the products and services aren't created. It's money printed out of thin air. So we're going to a place where obviously the value of our fiat dollar and other paper currencies is going to be increasingly questioned, because it's produced way more than any goods and services which have actually been contracting.
So where does that leave us, Dan? Where do we put our money, at least in the short term here? I mean, is gold and silver the only solution, or I mean, a portion of our money? I mean, how do we begin to navigate this? I know Doug Casey. He puts it this way. You know, we're all forced to become speculators in this environment.
Good point. He's a brilliant guy, obviously. Look, there's no yield, right? The net present value of stocks goes up the lower the discount rate is, which is piggybacked off the 10-year treasury plus risk premium. So we got these stocks. The S&P 500 is trading at 35 times GAAP last quarter earnings. We're taking about 40% of the EPS, GAAP EPS, out this year. And would be a lot worse if the government wasn't printing as much money and with all the fiscal largesse. But we're not going to get that same economy back that we've destroyed, most especially with this virus response. We were already doing it before, but now we've really accelerated it. So where do you put your money? Well, I think the most important thing will be not the return on capital, but the return of capital, of buying power. And that speaks volumes, obviously, about investing in physical gold and silver. And if you want to punt or speculate on that form of money, which has been money for thousands of years, being priced higher in this great reset, where both bonds and stocks are priced downward substantially based on earnings power, high PEs, based on solvency issues, based on inflation issues. Stocks and bonds are trading in bubble levels. We know that. It's been with us for a long time. But trees don't grow to the sky. You remember the dot-com bubble, and that we had the nifty 50s in the 60s. We had similar valuations, then all of a sudden the music stopped. And people ask themselves, what am I doing? And we're going to have that kind of moment. We had it this spring. We're going to have it again, because we're not moving forward to a wealth of nations kind of trajectory where we have less government, less regulations, better taxing. Despite Donald Trump's efforts, look at the size of government. It's expanding like crazy. So my response to you would be invest in scarce real assets that are vital, especially in the food complex and the energy complex, and in the real energy complex, with what propels our productivity and our output, namely in fossil fuels. And if you can be in those and hide in real money and wait for stocks and bonds to again be on the bargain counter, then you'll have cash on steroids if you buy gold and silver, or you'll be in industries that always do well in tough times, because you've said a couple times we're going into socialism. We might even be going into communism, Marxism, the way things are going. What is always scarce in those kind of economies? You kill the incentive to produce, right? And food and energy are always very scarce. So that in and of it by itself is a good place to hide. It's also a fine place to be, to then be able to take winnings off the table. If stocks and bonds, stocks could go back to a PE of 7. Bonds could yield 15% again. I know this sounds like heresy today, but we don't have reversion to the mean. We've always had a reversion beyond the mean. We go from bubble, not to a 15 PE, not to a 4% yield on a 10-year treasury, but we go to a 7 PE and a 13 or 14% yield on a 10-year treasury. And what that's going to do to the net present value of stocks and bonds is going to mean horrific losses for those that can't take these bubble valuations and get some of their capital into safety. And if you need to be cash, go a 3-month treasury. They can print the money. You have no duration risk. You know, those are the things that I would try to do.
That's powerful. Dan, I'm not exactly sure how long this interview's gone. I think maybe we're definitely over 30 minutes, and it's going to require a follow-up, which I'm happy to do. I love talking with you. But if you could share some closing thoughts here, please do. And again, thanks for coming on Crush the Street and sharing your wisdom with us. And we might need to do a follow-up soon after the election, especially as things start to play out, because I think that's going to be a pivotal point. You know, we'll kind of have an idea of where the direction of our country is going with the decision that is made. And who knows, maybe there isn't a decision made on November 3rd. So with that, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. Back in March, taking a look at history of viruses, and I'm not a virus specialist, and there might be some comments to that effect afterwards when you post this, but just looking at history. And I concluded that this outsized response was going to be worse. In other words, the cure, quote unquote, will be worse than the disease. What I think we're facing now is the aftermath of just how tremendously disallocating the global and national and state and county-based virus policy response has been. Yes, we had misallocations. Yes, we had cronyism. Yes, we had too much bureaucracy. Yes, we have growing fascism where big cap companies are in bed with the bureaucrats and there's a revolving door, the United States of Goldman Sachs or whatever you want to call it. But we are beyond any comparable yardstick, both globally and nationally, in terms of debt to GDP, in terms of how much money has already been printed, and how much erosion productivity are a toxic public policy stew. Too much bureaucracy, too much interference, too much growth in government, too much redistribution, whether it's to corporate America or to third world amnesty. These things now are all set to really blow apart in a way that promises for an interesting time, a reset of valuations where stocks and bonds and other things are again valued based upon sanity instead of just the Fed's ability to print endless amounts of money.
That's powerful. Dan, again, thank you for coming on the show with me today and sharing your thoughts. Really do appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kenneth. I appreciate the opportunity.